acknowledge my ancestors. I acknowledge my ancestors upon whose shoulders I stand. I acknowledge my ancestors upon whose shoulders I stand. I acknowledge my elders in this space. I acknowledge my elders in this space. I acknowledge my ancestors upon whose shoulders I stand. One Africa, one nation. One Africa, one nation. When I say one Africa, you say one nation. One Africa, one Africa, one Africa, one Africa, one nation. One Africa, one nation. For us as African people, we are concerned now. We're concerned now. Not only with knowledge, but with knowing. Not only with going, but with creating. Not only with seeking, but with repairing and with justice. We're concerned with repairing and with justice. One of the things that we're certain about, and we know this, is that Europe successfully colonized Africa, successfully colonized African lands, successfully colonized the African diaspora and the lands therein, and in the process successfully colonized African knowledge. And that is why we are concerned with the knowing, because the knowledge is funded, the knowledge is colonized, the knowledge is a white man's way of thinking. The knowing is what we're concerned about. In successfully colonizing African knowledge, the European completed the conquest of African people. So there's one thing that as African people we are sure of, and that is that the knowing is more important to us than the knowledge. The European colonized African land, African knowledge. And they colonized African knowledge not just to claim it as their own, but also to disconnect Africans from our heritage, our culture, our way of life, our very being, the essence of our very being. If you're more cut off, if you're cut off from your culture, if you're cut off from your heritage, if you're cut off from your very being, then obviously you're more easily manipulated, you're more easily controlled. even more so than the people who are not. So we wrestle not just against principalities and powers, we wrestle against intellectual colonialism. Intellectual colonialism masquerading as knowledge. Good morning to you. Here in Jamaica, we're still reeling from the European colonization of our lands. We're reeling from the European colonization of our knowledge and of our minds. And now we're being forced to endure a different kind of colonialism on top of all of it. Neo-colonialism, settler colonialism by China and Jamaica, of course, in the Caribbean and in Africa. So this now on top of all of the rest that I just spoke about. And all of this being presided over by the crown, by the state, by the elites, by the black bullies. And then because we have a government that is so licky-licky, the conversations that we should be having about leveraging, for example, China-Jamaica relations, we're not having. The conversations we should be having about colonialism, neo-colonialism, racism, classism, tourism, we're not having. What do we know? And how do we know it? You're inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African. This morning is a special morning because we're going to be taking your telephone calls all the way to 10 o'clock. But we know that there are a few things that we have to talk about. There are a few things that we have to move away from just talking about, but from the doing, but towards the doing. A few things I'm putting on the table. Going to be itemizing those in a while. But you know, there's a lot happening around us right now in the moment. Right at this moment, at this time, right now. And as it happens around us, we have been distracted. And it's smokes and mirrors. It's smokes and mirrors. And my charge to you is to keep focused, is not to be distracted from what the goal is, the ultimate aim. Lots of conversations happening around us. The Christianized, Western-trained African intellectuals and other members of the ruling classes here in Jamaica have joined the conversation. But we must remember that they're still intellectually colonized. So we're listening and watching at a higher vibration with a third eye. We're not fooled. There's still a global land rush for Africa and right here in the Caribbean. So we're not fooled. It's a nasty piece of business. Whether we're in Africa or we're in Jamaica, wherever we are, in the Caribbean, in the diaspora, Crown lands are the order of the day. And we're being pushed off, evicted, denied access to our own lands, sometimes in violent confrontation with the authorities, as we see big businesses begin to move in. While we're talking about the Governor General's badge, China is taking control of every town square and every town in Jamaica in settler colonialism, but we are distracted by the Governor General's badge. The Governor General's badge is neither here nor there, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he is the Governor General. And if you get rid of the position of the Governor General, you ultimately get rid of the badge. The badge is not really our business. The badge is nothing. And that's the bottom line. The badge is neither here nor there. Let's not be distracted. Let's remain focused. Because while all our attention, while we were captivated and we were all focused on this one thing, the badge, that's what the knowledge shows us. So what's the big deal now? It's always been that way. So the focus on the Governor General's badge is one thing. The Governor General now is also, he has come out, he's refused to wear the badge. He's now as pristine as ever. It is being reported in the international media, and he's getting a round of applause. But he's still the Governor General. The CNN reported this morning that Jamaica's Governor General has said that he will no longer wear the badge. And it was a story saluting the Jamaica's Governor General. Why does Jamaica have a Governor General in the first place? Get rid of a Governor General, you get rid of the badge. Get rid of a Governor General, you get rid of the medal. And if we focus on the medal, we lose a bigger picture, which is a position that is called a Governor General in Jamaica. Here we are, African people in Jamaica, with a head of state who is the enslaver of our ancestors. And we're cool with that? We're okay with that? And the defense of the enslaver as the head of state by the Prime Minister of Jamaica makes you want to vomit. The defense of the enslaver as the head of state by the Attorney General of Jamaica makes you want to puke. It's about time that we understand that some changes will never be handed to us. We've been having this conversation for too long. Some changes will never be handed to us. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? There's a food crisis coming, so they say. And we're seeing the rate of large-scale land deals in developing countries like Jamaica rising dramatically as the demand for log cabins and agricultural land intensifies. What are we going to do? While we're focused on the Governor General's medal, they're pulling the land from beneath our feet. We have a lot to talk about, and we want to take your telephone calls. That's what we're going to be doing this morning. But I want to welcome you to the space. You're inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African. We're going through until 10 o'clock. The Big A comes in at 10 with the Sunday sunshine. This is a morning when we want your own perspectives, your own thinking, your own points of view. We've been talking for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and you have been responding in many ways, social media-wise, WhatsApp, etc., etc. Now it is your morning to take the podium, take the microphone, and to say what's on your mind. Lots happening out there. Delroy Chuck must resign. The Attorney General must resign. We're going to tell you why. And there is no two ways about this, you know. They must resign. They must step aside. It's about time that these are stuff that we have to put our foot down, collective foot down, and say no more, no more, no more. Every woman in Jamaica this morning must look Delroy Chuck, the Minister of Justice, in his eyes and say, it's not because of what you, Delroy Chuck, said, but it's because you occupy the position of justice why you must go. And we must look at the Attorney General in the eyes and say also to her, my friend said, this is what patriarchy looks like. This is what patriarchy looks like. Dressed as a woman. That's the Attorney General. Because so much has happened since we last opened the phone lines like this to take your perspective on what's unfolding globally, what's unfolding from a Pan-African perspective. When your God and your Savior look like your master and your enslaver, you become the principal agent in your destruction. And it doesn't matter how many statues you dismantle, unless and until you take down the image of a white Jesus, of a white God, and of a white angels from the basis of your minds and from the walls of your churches and homes, you're still a slave. And what's more, you're actively participating in your own oppression and continued enslavement. There's also another way to look at this. And as I said last week, 2 weeks ago, yeah, I'm with all the statues coming down. I'm with all the white Jesus and everybody coming down. I'm with all of that coming down. But our ancestors were branded, burning hot steel branded with the names of their enslavers on their bodies. That was one thing that was done as soon as you were sold on the auction block. Branded. And, I stand not in judgment, but as a critical thinker and as a deep thinker, so many still wear the brand of the enslaver through the names that were given to them. So many still wear the names of the enslavers. So when you identify yourself, what's your name? What's your name? This to me, if with every statue that we support coming down, with every white foot off the neck of a black devil that you insist must come down, what do you have in your hands? What do you have control over? Why do you still wear the brand and the name of the enslaver that you hate so much? Maybe this is the time to think about reclaiming your name. That is within your power to do. And maybe you should insist that the state pays for this. Reclaim your names. And even if you don't want to reclaim it through a deed poll, legally, reclaim it somehow. Because it seems to me that the same spirit and the anger and the passion that is driving so many to say down with Columbus, down with Rhodes, down with Nelson, down with Queen Victoria, down with the enslaver, pull those statues down. It seems to me that when I ask you who you are and you give me a white man's name, when you give me the name of the enslaver and say that that is who you are, then that to me is more egregious than anything else. So reclaim your name. You've got that within your power to do for those who so strongly stand against the statues of any enslaver in any space. regardless of the space. You wear the names of the enslaver. Who are you? Who are you? And I say I'd stand not in judgment because I know it takes a time, a little while to get there. But who are you? What name? And when you call in this morning and I ask you your name, what will you say? Will you give me the name of the enslaver branded on you forever? Is that the name that you're going to give when you call in this morning? Let us have that conversation also. Sometimes we have to start with ourselves and become who we say we are. You know, it's sometimes when you reclaim your name, sometimes you become your name. Because in Africa, our names are not pulled from, any old place. Our names have meaning. And so once you give yourself a name that has meaning to you, which is who you have become or becoming, then it does make a difference in how you operate, in how you interact with others, in what your purpose, how your purpose looks, how you go after that purpose, and how, above all, how you interact with your fellow men and women, with your fellow African brother and sister. So reclaim your name. Reclaim your name as you dismantle the statues. So we're taking your telephone calls at 974-5079, 5051, 5043 and 1-888-991-4152. What's on your mind? The telephone lines are open right now. It is the Africa Forum. Our vision is to reunite the African family for development. Our mission includes breaking the cycle of mental control, blazing new paths towards Africa's rendezvous with destiny, bearing witness, demanding change, crafting an African-centered agenda for change and development, all the while honoring my moral obligation to remember. Taking your telephone calls in this segment of the program. They tell us that we're independent. And our motto says, out of many one people. Out of many one people continue to suffer, black people. Jamaica, they say, is a multi-ethnic society with a common nationality. But every ethnic group share a common culture. Empathy within any particular group is naturally greater than between different groups. The exception, of course, is among black people, having the unnatural tendency of loving other people above ourselves. Post-traumatic slavery disorder. Recent examples of the Shino ethnic insensitivity to black suffering here in Jamaica. Don't know if you recall hearing the National Security Minister Chang last year, He set a target of 800 murders for the year 2020. We just shrug. But if the security minister is setting a target of 800 murders for the year 2020, and we're okay with that, the question we must ask, would that number be okay if it was 800 Chinese murdered or 800 white tourists? Just think about it. If a national security minister was standing up and saying that we're setting a target here in Jamaica for 800 Chinese murder for the year, or 800 white people in Jamaica for the year, or 800 people who live above the clock for the year, would that be okay with you? Think about it. Well, they set that target for black people, and of course many more are being murdered every year. But why? Kevin O'Brien Chang recently lauded the virtue of European colonialism for civilizing Africans, black people. Why then were the British booted out of Hong Kong? Justice Minister Chuck is making light of sexual harassment victims, including black women, then pretending to apologize. We're going to ask him to read the diary of Thistlewood's diary. It must be a prescription for Minister Chuck, the Minister of Justice, but he must also step down. As Africans, we have reached a point where apologies are not enough, not nearly enough. Even as we see our oppressors, foreign and domestic, continue to increase the pressure of their boots on our necks. We were long and have been long aware in this space that they've got their boots on our necks. The Church of England apologized. The Bank of England apologized. Prince Charles on the Windrush apologized. The Pope apologized. Delroy Chuck apologized. Kevin O'Brien Chang apologized. Apologies just won't do. Reparations and repatriation now. Okay, don't know if it is my system here, but somebody please tell me what's happening. So we're opening the telephone lines and taking your telephone calls immediately. 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152 are the numbers to call. Want to talk about black self-organization, want to talk about self-reliance, land ownership, housing. You want to look at the anti-colonial struggle. It is our labor that is needed, not our presence. And that is why tourism is thriving in Jamaica. No matter how many statues we push down, the racist system will not change. Dismantle the statues at the same time you're dismantling the statutes. It is simple. We've got to get rid of the monarchy. We're operating under British law, British constitution, British monarchy. It is what it is. Unless we dismantle that constitutional reform, getting rid of the monarchy, then we'll be talking about a medal every day. Racism is systemic. Classism is systemic. Colorism is systemic. Tourism is systemic. And when you have a systems problem, we need to look at this from a systems analysis perspective. That means you're pulling the problem apart and you're getting to the core of it, not just responding to the symptoms of it. Tourism functions here in Jamaica hardly without question. And racial division of labor in the tourism sector is something that is pervasive. We see our black youth condemned by racism to the margins of existence here in Jamaica, condemned by classism to the margins of existence, and set upon by the police. That too is a reality. Well, we've heard that Minister Delroy Chuck yesterday, well, not just yesterday, but I think it was on Thursday, that he was speaking at a joint select committee meeting at Gordon House where the sexual harassment bill was being examined, and he indicated that victims of sexual harassment either report the matter within the 1-year time frame or forget about the matter. I think I have that clip, which I'll be taking to you shortly. But in essence, he says, we don't want the situation that now happens in the Me Too movement in the U.S., where 30 years later you talk about it. I was harassed in the elevator. It's better you hear Mr. Chung himself. So I want to count that clip. The minister was chuckling while he said that. And he said, no, if you don't complain within 12 months, please cut it out. You know, of everything that has happened since a year, please note that this statement from the Justice Minister in Jamaica, is the most egregious. This is worse than COVID. It's worse than the Sahara dust, because you have a Sahara dust in that perspective. And it's worse than most of what we have heard so far, because this is coming from the mouth of the Justice Minister. Do you understand what justice is? It means for the woman who's been raped, for the woman who's been sexually harassed, for the woman who's been molested, for the woman who's been harassed at the workplace and any other place, and who makes a complaint over 12, say 13 months after, there is no justice. And it means also that the Justice Minister lacks not just sensitivity, but so much more. And before I go on, I want you to listen to what the minister actually said. And if when we're through, every woman in Jamaica, regardless of political affiliation, this is not PNP or JLP or PPP or the God Church that is coming, the God Party that is coming. This is not a partisan political issue, but you better believe it's a political issue. And the Justice Minister must step aside. He must resign. No apology. And the apology he has given, the so-called apology he has given, is so insincere that it doesn't even count as an apology. But Minister Delroy Chuck, out of a sense of decency, has no option but to hand his resignation in to the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister, who is a father of boys and the husband to a wife, must accept it without question. Listen to Minister Delroy Chuck talking about sexual harassment in Jamaica of women. This is the Justice Minister. Listen to this. All right, let's put it here. All right, so we're going to take that to you in a little while. I want you to listen closely. You know, everything is malfunctioning this morning, but believe me, malfunctioning or otherwise, we're going to get out what we need to get out. And we hope that we can get in what we need to get in, which would be your telephone calls. So let's go to Minister Chuck. Listen carefully.
We don't want the situation that now happens in the Me Too movements in the U.S.
Yes.
Where 30 years later, you talk about I was arrested in the elevator.
Yes.
No, if you don't complain within 12 months, please, cut it off.
All right, let me replay this. We have to replay this, and we're going to play it again before the morning is out. But listen, this is the justice. Wherever you are in the world listening to this, this is the Justice Minister chuckling about a serious issue as sexual harassment. And women need to step forward. Women need to come to the fore now to say, enough is enough. Done with it already. And the fact that the Justice Minister doesn't want a Me Too movement in Jamaica means that, regardless of how you view the Me Too movement, because basically it's been used overseas to harass a lot of black men. But that aside, if you've been sexually harassed at the workplace, if you've been sexually harassed anywhere, maybe it's about time that we raise our hands and say, I was sexually harassed at the workplace. Maybe it's about time that we stand up, because he doesn't want it here. He doesn't want women to stand up and say, I was sexually harassed. This is the Justice Minister. And when he apologizes, he talks about he's sorry, it's insensitive. There is nothing about insensitivity here. What this is male patriarchy. And this is what you call toxic masculinity, masquerading as justice in the House of Parliament. Listen to him again.
We don't want the situation that now happens in the Me Too movements in the U.S. Where 30 years later, you talk about I was arrested in the elevator.
Yes.
No, If you don't complain within 12 months, please, cut it off.
Did you hear that? Did you hear how flippant he was? Did you hear that? If you don't complain within 12 months, please cut it out. Now, where is the anger of the Jamaican women? Where is the passion that we're supposed to be hearing from the Jamaican women? This is not a political partisan issue. This is a straight political issue. And every woman must stand up against this kind of toxic masculinity masquerading as justice in Parliament. Do you understand that if we don't do this now, we can't talk about protecting our girl children? If we don't do this now, we have no say. We have no moral authority to stand up and talk about protecting our children, especially our girls. My sister Kimberly Gabal says, oh, I see. So rather than admonish aggressors not to sexually harass their fellow human beings, we tell the victims to quickly move past fear, shame, anger, anxiety, and every other emotion and social trepidation to address this in the public sphere with laughter of his peers in the background. How predictably patriarchal. The person in Parliament who was saying, yeah, we need to find out who that is, and the laughter in the background, there must be a public apology in the House. Those who laughed must stand up and apologize. This is something out of the 16th century. Where is civil society on this? Where are the women of Jamaica on this? Where are the girls? Where are the young people, the young voices? The minister has no option. Minister Delroy Chuck has no option but to resign. There's no other option open to him. Apologies won't save him here. Apologies won't do that because of the position he occupies. He meant every word he said. And we are done with the apologies. We are done with the I am sorries. And listen to the apology. The apology is worse than any apology you've ever heard. The apology is a slap in the face to every woman in Jamaica. Do you understand what justice is? What is justice? What is justice? If this is the perspective, the thinking of the minister with a portfolio for justice. And what did the Attorney General say? The Attorney General responded to the minister who said that persons interpret his joviality as lack of empathy. I don't even care about, I do not care about lack of empathy. This is not about empathy. We know most of you are narcissists anyway, and you can't feel empathy. So nobody's talking about empathy. We do not give, whether it's lack of empathy or otherwise. We're talking about justice, which is the portfolio you oversee. And that is why you can no longer remain there. And I say to the Prime Minister of Jamaica that if he doesn't hand in his resignation, you are honor bound to ask for it. And in the same way the CNN is reporting this morning on the Governor General's decision not to wear the medal, you will hear this in the global media. There's no way that a justice minister can stand up in the House where laws are made, where justice is presided over, and say what he said and still remain the justice minister. The Attorney General must also resign. This is a crisis moment for us. So the minister said on Twitter that if persons interpret my joviality as a lack of empathy, it was not meant and never intended to undermine the severity of the matter at hand. I do appreciate that sexual harassment is a serious and traumatic subject. No, you do not appreciate that. You're lying. You're lying. All right. Here is the Minister of the Attorney General, MP Malahoo Fort, QC. That's another thing. You see these people who wear their QCs so proudly? We must have some conversations with them too. But I'll come back to the QC in a little while. Because if we're talking about decolonizing the space and complete, free and full emancipation and independence, then what is a Queen's Counsel? Who is a Queen's Counsel? What are you doing with a QC behind your name? Attorney General. But we know what it is, you know. And we're not surprised at any of it. But anyway, this is her response on Twitter. No stress, Minister. This is a woman. And my friend says this is patriarchy masquerading as a woman. No stress, Minister. I have observed particular line of attack by a group. They take expressions made during presentations out of context. One member orchestrates a criticism and then other members pick it up and repeat it several times. You have to see their approach to understand. Marlene Malahoo Fort, if she really said that, and it is on her social media thread, it is on her, under her name and picture and so on, Marlene Malahoo Fort then must also resign. She is the Attorney General. She looks like a woman. She must resign. She must resign. These are serious times, my love. Serious times. And so the Justice Minister must resign immediately, and the Attorney General must apologize and resign also. They have no option. It is simple. The worst part of all of this is that we have, for the most part here in Jamaica, we have, through a kind of a Europeanized, globalized consciousness, which we see as a higher level of consciousness, because African consciousness is a sin. It's a sin to be black. It's a sin to be born black. It's a sin to be African. Africanity, Africanness is in direct conflict with Christianity, because Christianity teaches that Africanism, and that's what they call it in Christianity, is a sin. Do you understand what our problem is? So it doesn't matter we tear down the statues. Did you hear what Donald Trump said 2 days ago? He said that they're tearing down Columbus and they're tearing down Nelson and they're tearing down, now they'll soon be tearing down Jesus. You understand the thinking? You understand the premise from which he's coming? So we have, through this kind of a European globalized consciousness, which, as I said before, we think is a higher level of consciousness. And that's what they want us to believe, that the more you think European, the more you act European. And they have a hidden agenda, you see, which they even pass on to our children in the schools. We've got to watch that too. That's why we say decolonize the curriculum, decolonize the spaces. So we too have bought into this illusion of freedom and independence. We're not recognizing that the revolution is unfinished. The promise of emancipation is not yet fully realized. That's why there is a Governor General. We don't so much care about the Governor General's badge. We care about a position that's called the Governor General. You see, the more we talk about the Governor General badge, and the more we ask the Governor General not to do this and not to do that, not to do whatever, it's basically what we're doing is legitimizing the role of the Governor General. Who cares what badge a Governor General wears? We don't want to legitimize the position of a Governor General. And sometimes in our own struggles and our liberation struggles, because we go after the symptom, we fail to recognize that in going after the symptom, we give legitimacy to the problem. The position of a Governor General is null and void. The promise of emancipation is not yet realized. It's not yet realized because political power without economic independence is meaningless. It is not yet realized because political freedom is meaningless without the right to own land. And so once again we say, give all those crown lands to the people. Give the crown lands to the people. That's how we legitimize the monarchy once again, by calling the lands that people are living on, calling the people squatters, and calling the lands crown lands. The promise of emancipation is not yet realized because education of the masses is impossible without the right to own property, without the right to develop a curriculum which reflects the culture of the people and not the culture of the enslaver. And this is why we say decolonize the curriculum. Decolonize education. The promise of emancipation is not yet realized because elections are meaningless, even as they're about to call one, when individuals are made to be totally dependent on government, and the electorate empowered only to vote for which corrupt dictator will run the government every 5 years. In the words of our elder ancestor Asajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, freedom is not something that one people can bestow on another as a gift. They claim it as their own, and no one can keep it from them. So it's about time we stop begging for freedom. We must claim freedom, and we must understand that power will not concede. I know that many of you are going to be running from here to say that I'm saying we shouldn't celebrate the best of us and the rest of us and so on. Yes, we should celebrate the best of us. There are many within our midst also who are holding ODs and CDs and so on. And we'll talk about that later. Because, you see, it is what it is. This requires some plain speaking. And for the sake of Africa, we must speak plainly. So even while we're celebrating the best of us, we must do so understanding that there is an unfinished revolution that has not yet been achieved. So we're looking at the unfinished revolution of Chief Tachi and of our ancestors who rose up with him Easter 1760 for full freedom, for political freedom, for security freedom, for economic freedom, for all Africans. Tachi, of course, preferring self-government with danger than servitude with tranquility. And we have to make that distinction of self-government with danger as opposed to servitude with tranquility. There is the unfinished revolution of Baba Sam Sharp and the thousands who fought with him in the wars of 1831-32 for total emancipation, facing neither east nor west, but facing forward. There is the unfinished revolution of Baba Paul Bogle and of our many African ancestors who stood up against the colonizer, the enslaver, against unfair taxation, against landlessness, which we're still fighting, and against injustices of a colonial government to say no more, no more, no more. That's the unfinished revolution that we are yet to fight. We understand, of course, that revolutions are brought about by the people. And every time the people get up to speak with one voice, the government of the day hijacks the process, as we see happening now. And so we notice that the people who are speaking to the issues now, that the masses of the people are fighting, the resource persons who are calling to speak on these issues, belong to the government. And if not to the government, then to the black boule who supports the government. What is Sir Hilary Beckles doing? Talking about statues and talking about pulling down statues. Hilary Beckles is knighted by the Queen of England. And between Sir Hilary Beckles and Sir Sridas Rampal and all the other sirs around, they too wear the shackles of the enslaver. They too wear the brand of the enslaver. And not only that, they are branded in the way that others are branded with the names. They deliberately chose to be branded with the titles of Sir. And they want to come speak on our behalf. We say no, 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 no. They have no right to speak for us because they are representative of those who would be among us who would have sold us out in the process of enslavement. This requires some plain speaking, and for the sake of Africa, let us speak plainly. Without the right to own land, all other freedoms are practically meaningless.